Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, sir. And how are you?
I am kind of almost giddy because I'm looking at you on the screen here, and you look good this morning. And
Right.
I know for a fact you've been under the weather for 2 or 3 days with a cold.
Uh, yes, sir. That's true.
I'm not seeing it.
Good.
Oh man. I found out something really interesting.
What was
I,
that?
I just found this out early this morning in the wee hours of the morning. I got up, I couldn't sleep, and I got up, listened to various and sundry podcasts. I listened to some of them because they're interesting, some of them because they teach me what not to ever do. I've got some different ones that are my favorites, and
Uh-huh.
and so I was just listening along, and I learned something.
What did you learn?
I learned that when producing a podcast, you can sing. It's like it's legal, and we can sing on the podcast as part of the content of the podcast.
But you understand if we do that, uh, and I'm involved with it,
Yeah.
our podcast will be unconstitutional.
There's no business like
No, no,
show
no, no, no.
business.
No,
What?
no, no.
What?
It'll be if I now you can do it all day long. I don't
Yeah.
care.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
if I join in with you,
Yeah.
it will become unconstitutional.
What are you talking about? No, we can sing on the podcast.
If I sing on the podcast, it'll be cruel and unusual punishment.
Oh, Roger, that's not true.
Yes, it is.
There may not be another person in the world that knows as much about general knowledge of music that is recorded and produced since what, the early 60s? You're just like you're like an Wikipedia brain person when it comes to all of that.
Yes, but my music teacher told me at a very young age, she said, Roger, you can carry a tune with the best of them, but you certainly have trouble unloading it.
She didn't know what she was talking about.
Yeah, I think she did.
No, there are so many times that something will happen and you will quote an obscure line from a song. And I'm one of the few people that actually most of the time know what you're talking about. I can name that tune, so to speak.
But you see, you said an important word there. You said, I can quote. You didn't say sing, you said quote.
I grew up in the biz, is all I'm saying. I know I can follow you, Roger, when you begin to expound and say things. I have the ability to keep up with you.
That's wonderful. You're one of the few who can. We'll have to play musical trivia sometime on the podcast.
So are we not going to sing? Is that what you're saying?
No, we're not going to sing.
You're the big guy here. You're the lead horse. It's Roger Dykes just saying. We could make a small change and say Roger Dykes just singing.
That would end the podcast quickly.
Oh, what a wonderful morning. Come on, Roger. Pick it up.
Oklahoma.
Oh, what a beautiful day.
Came from the Broadway play Oklahoma.
I've got a wonderful feeling. Roger, are you?
One of the reasons that they allow you to sing on a podcast, especially in your case, I don't think the people who wrote the song could sue you for stealing it. You've changed it at least 10%.
Roger, I'm going to continue from time to time giving you the opportunity to join in song on your podcast.
You can do that anytime you want to.
Where are you going to find another producer do something like that?
I hope I don't have to find another producer.
I'm one in a million. Oh, that's not what I heard. Now, wait just a minute. That is not what I heard. I was told the other day that you were seen in a restaurant out in public in your town there in West Texas, and I was told that you were meeting with a gentleman who appeared to be a podcast producer type, and I was just wondering if I'm fixing to get canned.
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
You have that power. I mean, you can be standing somewhere, or you could be sitting somewhere like Muleshoe, Texas, and you could look at me and you could say, "You'll never work in this town again." And I guess it would be true.
I doubt that you work that much in Muleshoe anyway.
Well, I've gone through my show notes here. Asking you to sing was, well, I'll mark that off. And seen in a restaurant with a podcast producer type, I'll mark that off. I guess we've discussed. Well, we might as well start the podcast.
All right.
Hello, I'm Michael Shawn, and welcome to Roger Dykes Just Sayin. Roger Dykes is a teacher and counselor with a master's degree in family counseling from Texas Tech University. He is the owner of UV Blake Records and has written a book titled Non-Persons Rolling in a Normal World. And there's a few more things. Roger was born with cerebral palsy, now a quadriplegic. He has been confined most of his life to a wheelchair. And for a while, even enjoying a career as a stand-up or sit-down comedian and after-dinner speaker. Disabled? Yes, but you forget about that pretty quickly because Roger thrives. So here is Roger Dykes.
Okay, well, I didn't know where you were going to give me an intro.
Just play like it just played.
Okay, I'll play like it just happened. See, that's confusing to those of us who are new to the industry. Okay, we play like we heard. Okay, well, hi, Michael. Good to see you this morning. How you doing?
I have so much fun with you, Roger. You are a lot of fun to do a podcast with.
Well, I'm glad you enjoy it because it's not easy to find a producer these days.
Well, actually it is,
Not really, not if you're in Muleshoe.
Oh, Roger, you're not in Muleshoe. Okay, now, we don't want scads of people going to Muleshoe door to door trying to find you. So we have to tell them you're not in Muleshoe. But you are a fine West Texas resident. And, we talk about a lot of serious stuff on your podcast, stuff that affects you directly, but also affects other people who may be dealing with cerebral palsy. You're a quadriplegic, which basically means that your brain works great, but your arms and legs, not so much. You described that one time as brain damage. Is that really what's going on?
Yes, sir. It definitely is going on, and that's what happened. And you can get brain damage. In my case, it happened at birth. You can get it at birth. There's a lot of people who are affected then, probably less now than there were back then. But nonetheless, but you can also get brain damage by having a stroke. You can have brain damage by being in an accident and hitting your head, having some damage done that way. So there are many, many ways to get brain damage. But in my case, it was called cerebral palsy, and I'm a quadriplegic not because my head works, the rest of me doesn't. I'm a quadriplegic because all four extremities, both legs, both arms, are affected. You will find people, for example, who have been in car wrecks that their brain was not affected, but maybe their spinal cord was damaged, and they'll be paralyzed from the waist down, but the upper part of their body will be fine. They're called paraplegics because only two of the four extremities are affected.
Well, what about your vocal cords, Roger? Yeah, they don't seem to be affected
No,
at all.
most of the time, or all of the time, I suppose, the brain damage would not affect the vocal cords. It affects the messaging system between the brain and the mouth, where it's difficult for people to form words and to say things the way they want to say them. So they
So,
go to speech therapy.
yeah. And
And
you that makes you unusual in the cerebral palsy community that you can speak and communicate where many of your brothers and sisters in that event do not.
that
And
is true. I am was very fortunate and very blessed. In fact, at the time when I was a small child, the doctors actually, according to my parents, the way they worded it was, we are going to call it cerebral palsy. And the reason was I fit all the symptoms of cerebral palsy as a small child, except for one, and that was I could talk. And they had never really seen that before.
well, what about singing? You can sing then. Clearly, you can sing.
At church with a large crowd, yes.
Okay, so like, what's a favorite song? What could we bust into right now?
We are not going to bust into anything.
Roger,
Well,
I am telling you, I have found out that we can add a whole new dimension to this podcast and that it is perfectly legal for us to sing. So I'm thinking, dun 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 dun, and you can bust out into song. I can give you an opening. I can set up the song for you if you want.
reminds me of the story of June. You remember June? June was busting out all over because June needed a bigger dress.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. You are a wealth of information when it comes to tunes from the past.
Yes, I'm a tunesmith from the past.
Roger, do you do rap music? Can you rap for us?
I can't even unwrap. I have to have help at Christmas.
Oh man, I am giving you these openings, man, for you really to display your talent on this podcast. That's one thing you do on a podcast,
I am using my talent and my wisdom of keeping my mouth shut when it comes to singing.
Well, I'm going to assume dancing is out.
You're right.
Okay, so we won't be doing choreographed dance numbers necessarily.
Wouldn't matter. They couldn't see it anyway.
I don't know. We could work on it a little bit, though, if you want.
A little soft shoe might be all right.
Hey, folks, let me tell you something. I've known Roger for years and years and years, and there's no getting ahead of him ever as you have conversations with Roger. Roger, I was visiting with some people the other day, and the conversation turned to Roger Dykes Just Sayin. And they said, so you really know this guy, as opposed to you just being a client of our agency and us producing this podcast. Well, but I said, oh, yeah. I said, I've known Roger for a long time, had some great visits with Roger. I said, if you get a chance to go by Roger's home, visit with him, I said, it'll always be a fun experience. And he will teach you things that you didn't even know you didn't know until he told you about them. And like, for instance, you are a buff of old television shows, particularly black and white Westerns that we all grew up with as kids. If you're a certain age. And there is nothing you can't tell about the character, the actors, their actual names, and what's happened to them since they were on that show and their careers. And you know all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm a rolling condominium of worthless information.
So you think about the singing idea. I think that would be big if we did that. A lot of people would
turn off.
Well, no, they would line up to hear a podcast like that. I mean, how many podcasters do you know that actually just break into song? I'm telling you, Roger, this is big.
Well, then how many podcast listeners do you think we have that are deaf?
You know, when we started this podcast, you were in a pretty good mood. And I'm sensing now, that you are tightening up, a tight-jawed reaction to this whole singing thing.
No, I just know my talent, and one of them is not singing. A man's got to know, to quote Clint Eastwood, a man's got to know his limitations.
You have a tight-jawed reaction to the whole singing thing. So we'll talk about that some more down the line.
All right.
Roger, you do a podcast every 3 weeks. To remind the people, or if you're a first-time listener, Roger's podcast was started when Roger was, well, for lack of a better term, upset one day because he was having a harder and harder time talking to the people in authority in the systems and programs at the state of Texas, and I think this is common throughout the United States, that not only administer the programs, which he is quick to always say that he is grateful for, but the fact remains that times have changed, and there is a lot of stuff now that creates uncomfortable challenges for Roger in his day-to-day life, and is a very serious thing. If Roger wakes up some morning and he does not have the help he needs on any day, at any time, despite the weather, despite whether or not it's on the weekend or anything like that, the fact is he is stranded and is not able to move about or obtain food or water or something as simple as using the restroom. And so you say, well, so what? The guy misses a day or two or something like that. It is a big deal. It is a very big deal, and it can be a dangerous situation for Roger. And the reason why we mention this, there are a number of challenges that have been created by simple things like inflation and the fact that if there is a problem with a caregiver, just replacing them, a very hard option for Roger, because it has become almost impossible for him to get help based on what the state says the way he is to manage his caregivers.
Well, let me word it this way. The clients on these programs are generally not in control of anything. Now, specifically maybe so, but generally they're not. Although the program says that it's a consumer-directed program. Now it's CDS, and that's what it stands for. The consumer, that being the client, that being the disabled person, is supposed to be in charge. They're supposed to be able to set the rules and the guidelines and so forth. And they can, and they have every right to do that. And that's what the state wants to have happen. But what you have to understand is that a disabled person who is totally disabled, I mean, in the sense of not being able to do a lot for themselves.
Of which you are a perfect example.
Of which I am a good example of. But we are always at the control of someone. We are never independent. Now, if you have family who can back you up, you have some degree of independence because you can work with your family to come in and carry on if you have a problem with a caregiver or a housekeeper or a cook or whatever. And when you say to the caregiver or the cook, either do it this way or leave, you better have somebody handy to come in and fill in for them because you may go several days without any food.
If the listeners of this podcast will try to imagine something, if you take both of your hands, both of your arms, and tie them behind your back securely, you can't use them. Then you take both of your legs and your feet, and you wrap them up like a mummy. You cannot use them. And then set you in a wheelchair. I defy you to find something that you can do to take care of yourself. You are in need of care to do anything. And Roger works at a computer. He still has a life. There are people. He teaches classes, and he does all these things that he have found ways and learned to do. And there are so many people that care about him. There are people, Roger, and I want you to comment on this now. There are people who would say, well, you just need to put him in a home. You know, they have care facilities for people like that and just ship him out. Roger, you want to touch on that?
Well, it's true I can be shipped out. And that is a constant concern. And that's one of the reasons we don't complain, because that is the state's answer to all problems. At the point in time that I'm not able to find help or sustain working here or live with the system as it is, then that will be the ultimate answer to the problem. And it will be state paid for, and I will, all of that sort of thing. But for those that are thinking about it, I will not be the state does not put people like me in the most glamorous situations in nursing homes. We're not put in the fancy senior care places. We're put in the ones that the state has contracts with. So
and that's not to say, Roger, that you live fancy now. You just enjoy some freedom.
Well, and a different kind of lifestyle. But the fact of the matter is that if I'm placed in a situation like that, which may one day happen, I'm sure. But when it does, my world as I know it now will cease to exist. That does not mean I'm going to quit. It means it's going to cease to exist as it is now. I will not have access to computers and to TV and to video and all the things that I work with here to keep an active lifestyle and do all the things that I do, because the theft rate in nursing homes overall is so great that it is unwise, I'm told, to carry anything of any value with you to the nursing home. Without my equipment, without all the things that the state has put in here for me to use, I will be relegated more than likely to watching I Love Lucy reruns on the sun porch in place of doing the various things I do now. Therefore, I would prefer to stay out of that situation for as long as possible so that I can continue to contribute to society as I get to do now.
You know, Ricky Ricardo sings on those programs. Have you ever heard that?
Yes.
I mean, he sings on his show.
He
just thought I would drop that in there.
You probably don't remember this, but he actually sings the words to the theme song of the I Love Lucy show.
I love Lucy and she loves me. You didn't think I knew that, did you?
I was surprised. What episode was it in?
Oh, well, I don't know, but I know something else he sings. He sings Baba Louie.
That's true. But let's go back to which episode was he in that he sang the theme song I Love Lucy.
Oh,
See, you don't know.
I'm dangerously close to not caring, but tell me, please.
All right, I will. It was Lucy's birthday, and she thought everybody forgot her.
Oh.
And so she goes to the park and meets this group of hobos, and they begin to pep her up, and eventually she goes to the club where Ricky is, and it was a surprise to her, but she gets there, and then he sings the song, I Love Lucy.
Oh, you know what? Everybody knew that. Raise your hand. Oh, man. Roger, from the mind of Roger Dykes. There it is, ladies and gentlemen, just a small example of what I'm talking about. Roger, it's hard to believe, but we're almost out of time on this podcast. I want to thank you for showing up. You and I talked yesterday, and I didn't know if you were, because you were kind of feeling bad. And, I told you, man, we can put this off if you want. And I called Roger this morning, and he was like a positive thinking coach. I thought the whole podcast would change this morning, and Roger would quote Zig Ziglar. Anyway, hey, Roger, if it was a perfect day and you had exactly what you wanted, and you could pick up the phone and dial the number or even email a individual at the state capitol of Texas and say, hello, I'm Roger Dykes, and I have a feeling they're going to already know who you are, and just say, man, I've got this situation, and there is no answer under the current system. And sooner or later, the bottom's going to fall out. And you're going to wind up calling an ambulance to take you to the emergency room to save your life, which is going to be a whole lot more expensive than what you're talking about probably needs to be done. But Roger, what would you say to that person if you found somebody that would so much as take your call?
Well, it would be very difficult to come up with a single sentence answer to that question. There are many things I would like to do. What I would really like is to get that person and say, can I have an appointment with you, either Zoom it or come by my house, depending on where you're at. Come by and let's talk, because I need to share ideas with you and have you tell me whether or not they're feasible. All too often, when you start dealing in state-run programs, the reason things are done the way they are is because of some law, legislation, or something that affects the system that the consumer is not necessarily even aware of. So I'm not saying that every idea I have is such a great idea and it should be implemented, because I don't know enough to make those judgments. But what I would like to do is get with someone with authority that can make changes and suggestions and say, here are the things that need to be adjusted. What can we do to get them adjusted?
Boy, wouldn't that be great? A responsive government. I like that.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
Roger Dykes, just saying. Roger, thank you for spending a little time with us on this podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad I could be here. I'm glad you were here as well. I'm glad we had the listeners we do, and hopefully we'll see you in about 3 weeks.
Adios, brother.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to Roger Dykes Just Sayin. If you'd like to get a message to Roger, his Facebook account is listed as Roger Dykes. Become a friend, or you can send your questions and comments to rogerdykes51@gmail.com. That's ROGERDYKES51@gmail.com. Our podcast reveals a new episode every 3 weeks. Rollout is on Wednesday evening, shortly after dark, Texas time. Join us next time for our next episode of Roger Dykes Just Sayin. I'm Michael Shawn. On behalf of Roger Dykes, thanks for listening.